Most of our cars today have that annoying little check engine light that comes on. And it's hard to know how serious it is. Do you pull over right away? Do you head to your mechanic as soon as possible? Can you put it off until it's just convenient to get it checked out? And then when you do, you find that sometimes the only reason for the warning light is that some sensor is not working. And it's not that anything's wrong, it's just that your ability to know that something is wrong is wrong. So I think we run into that same problem with our conscience. You might want to assume that God speaks to us and guides us through our conscience, but that's not necessarily the case. Because when we go through the New Testament in 1 Corinthians 8, Paul says that our conscience can become weak, so that we're overly sensitive. On the other hand, he also says in 1 Timothy 4:2 that a person's conscience can become seared, so that it's numb to the truth. It doesn't react. So as God providentially leads us through different circumstances, we must humbly bring our conscience into alignment with his truth. In Acts 22, we'll pick it up at that last verse, verse 30, and go down through 23, verse 5. Luke shows us both the confidence that Paul is able to experience in having a clear conscience, but then the way that he responds when he realizes that he needs to make an adjustment. So Luke is talking about the Roman tribune still, and he says, "But on the next day, desiring to know the real reason why Paul was being accused by the Jews, he unbound him and commanded the chief priests and all the council to meet. And he brought Paul down and set him before them." Chapter 23, verse 1. "And looking intently at the council, Paul said, 'Brothers, I've lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day.' And the high priest, Ananias, commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, 'God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law? And yet, contrary to the law, you order me to be struck?' And it tells us those who stood by said, 'Would you revile God's high priest?' Paul said, 'I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest, for it's written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people.'" So we know from other historical records that Ananias was the high priest from AD 47 to 59. And this is probably happening around 58. So, of course, Paul was engaged in ministry elsewhere during that time. He does not seem to know Ananias by sight. And he calls him a whitewashed wall in response to his hypocrisy. And he's not wrong about that. The historian Josephus says that Ananias would send servants to collect tithes from people while they were threshing their wheat. And if they refused to give, they'd be beaten. Ananias is also known for collaborating with the Romans. And so about 6 years after this exchange, Jewish revolutionaries rose up against Rome and killed Ananias. So as Paul stands before him, initially he is confident. He's unashamed because his conscience is clear. But then he learns that Ananias is the high priest, and that changes. He realizes his response doesn't show the respect that should be given to the office of high priest, and so he humbly corrects himself. Now, how could Paul's conscience be clear after all that he had done to persecute Christians? Interesting to say that he has this level of confidence that we see here in this passage. The wonderful truth is that our consciences are cleansed through faith in Christ. It talks about that in Hebrews 9, verses 13 through 14. It says, "For if the blood of goats and bulls and the sprinkling of defiled persons with the ashes of a heifer sanctify for the purification of the flesh, all the Old Testament ceremony, right? How much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience from dead works to serve the living God? It's faith in Christ that sets us free from the guilt of our past. And yet, as we see in this passage, we have to stay teachable. We must acknowledge those times when our conscience is misinformed, and it needs to be corrected. In 1 Timothy 1:5, Paul says, the aim of our charge is love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. Are you confident that your conscience is good and clear? Have you been cleansed through faith in Christ? If so, then trust the Lord and stay teachable. And that advice applies to a fourth circumstance.